Hi.
Hi, how
Hi.
are you guys doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm just really so pleased that I can translate time zone.
I was just trying to tell him that I'm like, well, she's in a different time zone, so it's okay. I mean, she'll be on. I bet she can figure it out though. But
I was
thanks.
like, is it now or in an hour? Now or sick? Yeah, tell me about yourself, Sawyer.
I'm Sawyer. I came across your name by an article I found on space.com about life on Mars. And
Oh,
um, I go to Hitchcock in Omaha, Nebraska, in the Millard Public Schools district. And I'm really interested in space and discovery and NASA and all that stuff.
hmm.
Um, one thing I want to know is when did you know that you wanted to work at NASA?
That's a great question, Sawyer. I think it's really cool that you're so young and you have really cool interests and you're thinking about things like this. Because I actually didn't think about coming to NASA until I was in my late 30s. So I'm what we would call a non-traditional student, which means I didn't go to college right after high school. Not everybody does. And I spent a lot of time exploring other jobs, worked all around the world, did cool stuff, fun stuff. But then at some point, I was ready to go to college. And so I did. And I studied chemistry, but I was really interested in plants and the evolution of plants because plants have had many different kinds of ways that they exist on landscapes over the last 100 million 200 million years that they've been
Yeah.
on the surface. And so that's what I studied in grad school. But then when I was in grad school, um, I actually started learning about the way we can take the way we study ancient Earth. And that's very much the same kind of model that we use for studying places like Mars by looking inside rocks to see what's there that tells us about past environments. That's a lot of how we approach Mars. And so I ended up actually trying to figure out how to relate my work on Cretaceous plants, which is plants from when the dinosaurs were around, to things like Mars, and got funding from NASA to finish up my PhD. And then I came here for a postdoc. So it's a little bit later than you might think.
Yeah, that's a cool journey though.
You got to jump on me, Sawyer.
Another question I have is how did you get into NASA?
Yeah, so since I had funding from NASA when I was in graduate school, and graduate school is what you do after college. It's when you apprentice under a scientist to get your PhD. So I get to be Dr. Graham. Um, so when I was in grad school, I had that NASA funding. And with that NASA funding, I was able to meet a lot of NASA scientists. And then I did what's called a postdoctoral fellowship. So after you finish your PhD, you go and you spend some time learning new techniques because you spent like 5 or 6 or 7 years just doing one thing really, really, really hard and a lot. And then you branch out for a couple of years to pick up new skills. And I came here to NASA and worked with a scientist, Jen Stern, who works on the SAM instrument on the Curiosity rover. And then one thing led to another. I had some good ideas and I put in proposals for funding, and those things got funded. And next thing you know, it's 9 years later and I'm still here.
That is awesome. What field do you work in at NASA?
So I am in the astrochemistry lab. And astrochemistry is the study of all of the chemistry that's happening out in space, not necessarily on planets, but rather on primordial materials that become planets, as well as the chemistry that's happening inside stars and in stellar nebula where stars are being born. And we relate all of that chemistry back to planets because it's the birthplace of everything that becomes a planet happens out there in space. And
Yeah.
I'm imagine you think that's a little bit weird since I study life.
Mhm.
Um, but the reason why we connect astrochemistry to life is because everything that becomes life, all of that starting material started out there in the stars. And so we're trying to understand that background of stars because a lot of the shared materials of life are still out there, and trying to understand how to detect life without mistaking it for all of those things that look like biology out in the stars is why I'm in the astrochemistry laboratory.
That's cool. Um, I have another question. Do you think there, just straight to the point, do you think there could have been life on Mars?
You know, that's a great question. Could have is a really critical word that you're
Yeah.
using right there. Absolutely, there was a time in Mars past when it would have been very clement. You and I wouldn't have even minded it too much. There was a lot of water on the surface. There were oceans. I think I talk about that in the video that you saw on space.com. There were oceans. There was more atmosphere than there is now. It's a little hard for us to know what the composition of that atmosphere is. It was probably still pretty CO2 rich. It was probably, we know a lot warmer because it had all that water on the surface. And that's also the effect of that atmosphere. So it wouldn't have been so bad. The other thing to think about is that, it wasn't that different than an early Earth, where life arose here on this planet. So if we're just thinking about environments, there's no reason not to think that Mars couldn't have had life on it, since
Yeah.
it's just so Earth-like.
Mhm. Do you has NASA done any research like of life on Mars today, deep below the subsurface?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of talk about the subsurface, and I bet you know why, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, so it looks like there's probably water ices
Mhm.
below the surface, and it's more protected from radiation. A big problem for life on Mars right now is that without an atmosphere, all of the harmful radiation, like the kind that gives you sunburns, but even worse,
Yeah.
that's coming from the sun, doesn't get stopped by an atmosphere and just affects the surface. And all of that radiation is really bad for organic chemistry that you and I are made of, organic molecules, and also life. So that's why people are starting to think more and more about the subsurface as protection from radiation and the possibility for water in the form of ices, or even maybe liquid water, because there's also a lot of salts in the subsurface. And I bet you know this already, but salt water and fresh water have slightly different freezing points.
Yeah.
So that's how you can have icebergs.
Mhm.
So the search for life in the subsurface right now hasn't really started. The rover that we sent, I'm going to tell you some facts about Mars exploration, and because I want you to know that, like, gaining information is something we're doing all the time. When I was your age and in school, I wasn't that interested in science because I didn't have a great teacher like you did, who's helping you learn about current research. And when I was reading about science, I thought there weren't any really new questions and that everything we needed to know people already knew. And so it didn't spark any curiosity for me until long afterwards when I was an adult. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're still learning things. And so we didn't really know how much radiation was affecting the surface of Mars until the Curiosity rover got there. And that was, oh gosh, about 15 years ago, 10 or 15 years ago. And so once we knew that, we were like, oh my gosh, we better start thinking about the subsurface. And so people were doing work to figure out, like, are there certain kind of rock types that are more protective than others? And in the meantime, they were building the Perseverance rover that launched just like 4 or 5 years ago and is on the surface right now. And they made a drill for the Perseverance rover because they're like, let's get in the subsurface, but they only made it 5 inches deep. And
Yeah.
now that we've been able to do a lot of research and understand how much rock you need to protect you from radiation, we realize 5 inches isn't enough. So the new rover that will go there that we've built in partnership with Europe, which is called ExoMars or the Rosalind Franklin rover, that is going to be able to go down about 3 feet. And we think that will be the kind of depth we need to be able to actually see a lot of stuff about Mars past, and if there's anything potentially living in that subsurface as well.
Yeah. Okay. Why can't you live without a magnetic field?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. So not only does that's a next level science question, Sawyer. Good job. So I talked about the atmosphere and how it protects you from radiation, but I didn't mention the magnetic field because that's kind of a weird concept to think about. But the magnetic field actually does a lot of work to protect us from cosmic radiation. And how that works is there's a charge around the planet. So have you ever seen an electric fence?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you can kind of almost imagine you feel the electricity coming off the electric fence. It's probably psychological, but they're scary, right? You touch them once and you're like, never again. So that electric fence has a charge around it. Now, if you were a particle coming from the sun that's cosmic radiation, like UV, looking to give you a sunburn or blow up some organic molecules, and you come into that area of charge, it actually deflects that particle. So that magnetic field around the planet will actually deflect the particles away. And so that's why we need magnetic fields, or we think we need magnetic fields on planets in order to promote life, just to protect us from all of that radiation that comes from stars and our closest star, the sun.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that makes sense. You let me know if I don't make sense.
Yeah, no, it makes complete sense. Yeah. What is NASA currently doing to build on Mars Discovery?
Oh, wow. So a big thing that we're working on right now is how to bring back the Mars samples. So we have the rover up there with the 5-inch drill bit, and it's busy drilling tubes that have sections. You can think of it like a post hole, but a very, very small post hole. And they're pulling out those and they're putting them inside these titanium tubes that protect them from that radiation. And they're putting them inside a device that can be picked up by another robotic system to bring it back to Earth. So it probably doesn't sound terribly exciting, but we're figuring out a way to deliver a package from another planet back here to Earth. And that's actually something we haven't really done before. We've done things like OSIRIS-REx, whereas a robot came in and grabbed a bunch of stuff and then came back to Earth. And that's kind of how we did Genesis and Stardust, which were capture missions that went to comets and solar particles and things like that. And when we went to the moon, we just sent people because the moon's super close. We just sent people and they grabbed a lot of rocks, like 300 kilograms of rocks, and brought them back. But we've never had to go and pick up a package and bring it here from someplace as far away as Mars. So that's a lot of what we're working on right now. And it's a really important activity. It's more rock than we would have ever seen from another planet. And so we need lots of engineers who will be part of this in the future. I do a lot of work on Mars sample return myself, and we'll need lots of analysts to help us figure out what these rocks mean when they get back. So that's a lot of what's going on for Mars right now.
Yeah, really cool to know what's all going on.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's always more than you know about because it gets a little bit diluted in the news.
And then are you studying any other planets at the moment?
Yeah, so I do some work related to a moon in the outer solar system, Enceladus. Have you heard of that?
I have not.
So there are a couple of moons in the outer solar system. I'm looking to see if we have any good things that I can send you about Enceladus. I'll see what I can find you and send them to Ms. Hansen. There might be some good resources to send to you about Enceladus because I know there's not as much information out there. But there's a couple of moons of Jupiter and Saturn, so very, very far away in the outer solar system, that are covered in oceans. And these oceans have big ice crusts. Think of like the Arctic or Antarctic Ocean. And they know that they have magnetic fields,
Yep.
just like you're talking about, because they're active planets. They have geysers coming out of them. And we're hoping to be able to design spacecraft that can go through the plumes of those geysers and pick up water from those oceans that are below the surface. There is a spacecraft that will be launching this year called the Europa Clipper, which is going to go to one of those icy moons. And so that's the other planet that I work on, just because it has an ocean.
Mm.
It seems like a good place. If you were a critter, it would be an okay place to live. Or so we think. We've only seen it a couple times because it's very far away. It takes a spaceship about 7 years to get there.
That is a very long time.
So if it's launching this year, you'll be in high school when it gets there.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Space is very large.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Well, thank you. That was a very thrilling interview. I just got a lot more information for my project, and I'll have to put a lot of this in there. And
Yeah.
we're planning to present this to the whole school during our dessert and display, which is where we have a bunch of projects and a bunch of art pieces that are up around the school. So that
Wow, doing art pieces too. Are you working on an art piece?
yeah, we had one finished. I more like to do like learning projects, but like then they also have us do like other art projects as well.
So are it's okay, so you can admit it. Are you a bookworm?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. You know, there's all of these, what's kind of neat about working at a place like NASA is there's all of these different kinds of people with all of these different skills, and all of them are necessary. You know, when we think about like doing NASA work, we
Yeah.
think about math, and we think about engineering, and we think about science, but really being able to make those connections and just being willing to learn, always be learning, is the most important thing that you need to do. Because what I've come to learn being here, learning, what I now know being here that's so much different than when I was your age is that we are in a constant state of discovery. There's so little we actually know about our solar system and even a lot of our planet that there's always an opportunity to be learning. So I'm really happy that that's something you enjoy, because that's going to serve you really well.
Yeah.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you so much. We
Absolutely.
appreciate you taking the time, how thorough you were in everything that you talked about. Sawyer's got a lot, he's got a bright future ahead of him for sure. So thank you for being part of that today, and just like being able to have this experience with us, I think is super important. It's the first time we've ever done projects like this. And so, yeah, well, I'm just super excited for him. I'm super excited for our students because everybody gets to choose, whatever they're interested in. And so thank you.
Ms. Hampton, I can connect you with our education staff here if you'd like, because they have lots of resources that I think would probably help you.
Yes.
And I would tell you, like, there really is probably no scientist alive that doesn't want to tell you about what they're studying, because most of us are really excited about it. And if they don't answer you, it's probably just because they had a million things going on. But deep down inside, if they had known and remembered and saw that email, they would definitely talk to you.
Oh, that's awesome. So, something that our school does is we have STEM days, and so we've been celebrating STEM throughout our school, and in a whole day full of activities. And I plan all of that. And actually, a lot of the activities that I have gotten are from NASA. And so.
Good.
I remember one last year, our kindergartners made like galaxy slime.
Oh.
And that I think that was from your website. And I don't know, there was something from NASA that I got. So yeah, if you could send over any information that could
I'll
help.
just connect you with them because they know all that. They know all the stuff. So
Yes, that's awesome. Okay. Well, I know that you're very busy as well, and so just thank you very much. One last question. If we were to send you something in the mail, where would we send it?
Oh, should I put this in the chat? So, because it's kind of long?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if you wanted to too, you could also just email it to me.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I'll send you the mailing address here.
Okay.
Oh,
That
I
would
love
be
getting good mail.
that'd be perfect. Okay. All right. Well, have a great rest of your day and a great weekend.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Sawyer.